Wednesday, a world without movies. In my dream, a voice said, "Life is a tragedy when seen in close-up, by a comedy in long shot." The little tramp that spoke wore a silk hat, an oversized suit, and twirled his walking stick as he approached. These words have always moved me, from the first time I heard them, and even more so now. I want to tell the man how important these words are to me, but I can't get the words out. The little man continued, "There's something just as inevitable as death, and that's life." For the first time ever, now that I stood at the store, I understood the significance of these words. Life and death have the same value. The problem for me was that lately, the scales were starting to tip toward the latter. Up until yesterday, I thought I was living as best as I could and didn't think I was doing too bad of a job of it. But now, it seemed that all I had left were regrets, and that my life was gradually being crushed by the overwhelming weight of death. The man in the suit came over to me, as if he'd read my thoughts. While stroking his mustache, he asked, "What do you want meaning for?" "Life is all desire, not meaning. Life is a beautiful, magnificent thing, even to a jellyfish." That must be true, I thought. Life must mean something to everything, even a jellyfish or a pebble by the side of the road. Even your appendix must exist for a reason. So what does it mean when I make something disappear from the world? Isn't that some sort of unforgivable crime? Does my own life hang in the balance? I start to wonder whether I might actually be worth less than a jellyfish. Shiki, don't get too comfortable. I'm about to yell in the mic in 10 minutes to wake you up. The funny little man in the suit came closer, and as he approached, I recognized him. It was Charlie Chaplin. He stood right before my eyes, holding his hat in front of his face. I heard a meow. When I searched for the source of the sound, I discovered a cat wearing a top hat. I tried to crow in surprise, but still couldn't make a sound. The next thing I knew, I was sleeping out of bed. I looked over at my clock. It was 9 in the morning. How about the rest of us? Don't worry about it. Probably don't worry about it, so fool. Cabbage was on the bed, looking at me with a concerned expression. He let out a meow and curled up on my pillow. I stroked him gently. "Nah, I'm still alive," I thought as I felt his soft, warm, fluffy fur underneath my fingers. Slowly, the cogs in my brain began to turn and the events of the precious night started to come back to me. I had collapsed in front. There's no way this is a couch cat. I had collapsed in front of the movie theater after feeling all cold and dizzy, but what happened after that was a total blank. My head was still aching and I could feel that I still was running a slight fever. "Okay, come on now, what is this?" "Such a drama queen," I called from the kitchen. I mean, not me, my devil doppelganger. "It's no big deal, you just caught a cold." "What do you mean just a cold?" The red shirt Aloha was wearing was so gaudy it hurt my eyes. "I mean, all you have is a little cold and yet I had to drag you all the way back here from the theater. It wasn't an easy task, man, even for a devil." Aloha poured some hot water into a mug, then added some honey and a slice of lemon and began stirring. He continued, "You seem to be suffering so much I thought you were going to die." Aloha brought over the mug and plonked it down beside me. "I'm sorry," I apologized. I want to take a sip of the sweet and tart liquid. It was delicious. "Just so you know, this life-prolonging deal we've made has always worked out okay for me in the past. Every time, if I messed up, God will be angry with me. No more of this passing on the street, okay? We've come this far. I'll be more careful in the future, I promise. You're not exactly in the best position to be talking about the future, okay? Just remember that." There was always an annoying comment waiting to come out of Aloha's mouth. But there was nothing I could really do about it. The guy was throwing me a lifeline after all. Meow. Do I have you say these lines? Cabbage let out an exasperated meow as he jumped off the bed and left the room. Apparently even he'd had enough of aloha. The devil waited for me to finish sipping his honey lemon concoction and then resumed giving me the 3rd degree. So, what are you going to do? About what? Oh, come on now. The deal. Where are you going to make this appear from the world next? Oh, right. Yesterday, I proposed movies. I remember. Should we go for it? Press the delete button, or would you rather quit right here? If movies disappeared from the world, I wondered. I tried to imagine what it would be like. It wouldn't be easy. I'd be losing one of my favorite things. I realized it's a little silly to get so sentimental about a hobby. I mean, with me being so near to death and all. But I did have a huge DVD collection. And it would be such a waste to lose it. Also, I had just bought Neo Blu-ray disc, a Stanley Kubrick collection, and a Star Wars series. Sofu, you're banned. Hurry up, what's it gonna be? Aloha pressured me for an answer, but this was a serious conundrum and I needed a minute to think. Glug glug. Does it have to be movies? I asked. Yes. There's no other way? Well, let's see. Shall we think of something else? I began to think of the other possibilities. What about music? No music, no life reads a sign outside a Tower record store. Would it be possible to live in a world without music? I suppose we'd all manage somehow. All those rainy days holed up in my room listening to Chopin. I guess I could do without those. Life might still be the same. Surely there'd be other things to find comfort in, but what would a sunny day be like without Bob Marley? I wondered. Not quite the same, I suppose, but I guess I learned to manage. We'll play more of a passive role in this one. I guess he gets to be more devilish by playing an actively devilish role. What about the almost unbearable high I get from listening to the Beatles while speeding along on my bike? It's my background music that I listen to while I'm at work delivering the mail. I guess I'd get through the workday without it somehow. Or how about listening to the melancholy melodies of Bill Evans on my way home at night? Walking down the darkened streets, giving that up would be too painful. Conclusion 1. No music, yes to life. I'd go on living even without music, although I admit it would be a sad existence. I ran through a list of other options for comparison. No coffee, no life, no comics, no life. Let's say there was more coffee or comics. Life would go on. I'm sure I could live without Starbucks lattes. And comics, it would be difficult, but I could do without Akira, Doraemon, or Slam Dunk, if it meant saving my life. If it's not the music, I would get rid of coffee, because I don't drink coffee. Look, I'll level with you. I didn't want to give up anything, most especially not my collection of anime figures or my limited edition sneakers. It was the same as, say, getting rid of hats, or Pepsi, or ice cream. I wouldn't like it. It's not like I'd die without them. I'd give that all up in a second in exchange for my life. Conclusion 2. Basically, all human beings really need to survive is food, water, and shelter. In other words, pretty much everything in this world, everything that humans have made, is pretty unnecessary. They're fun to have around, but we could do without them. Movies, though. I've had an obsession with my whole entire life. So the question is, if all movies disappeared, would it feel as if part of me had disappeared along with them? There is a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. That's a line from The Matrix. It seems to me that the idea of something disappearing from the world and what the world would actually be like without it are two totally different things. It's not only about the thing suddenly not being there. There's something else that happens that can't be measured. It's a real loss and emptiness that's created. It's so small you could miss it, but without anyone noticing, our lives are changed completely. More than anything, the idea of not being able to watch movies made my heart ache. I thought of my ex-girlfriend, who loves movies so much, and everyone around the world who loves going to the theater. If I robbed all of these people of something that matters so much to them, it would be like I was committing a crime. And that kind of guilt would be a heavy thing to carry around. But then again, what about my own existence? It was either my life or movies. Ultimately, I decided that my life, which was hanging by a thread, was non-negotiable. If I was dead, I wouldn't be able to enjoy movies anymore. Nor would I be able to appreciate my ex-girlfriend's love of movies or any other cinephiles around the world. Saying nothing new flew our shelter, only one who lived up to 25 actually. So I made a decision. Movies would disappear. I remembered a line from a movie I once saw. There are lots of people in this world who want to sell their soul to the devil. The problem is there isn't a devil around who's willing to buy. But that quote's got it wrong, since I have sold my soul to the devil. Obviously, I never dreamed the devil himself would ever actually appear and offer me this kind of deal. So, it looks like you made a decision, Aloha said, sounding cheerful. Yes. Okay, well then, you know the rules. You get to see one last film, but just one. Take your pick. But there's so many, it was too much, I couldn't choose. I could do a screening of your favorite film? I could do a screening of your favorite film for you here one last time if you'd like. My ex-girlfriend's parting words rang in my ears from the night before. It's almost as if she knew what was coming. Of all the movies I loved, I had to pick which one would be the best I'd ever watch. That's not an easy thing to do. Should I pick one of the films I've seen before? Or something I haven't seen yet? I've read magazine articles and seen TV shows where someone is faced with a question like, what would you have for your last meal, or what would you take with you to a desert island? I never imagined that someday I'd be faced with the same kind of choice. It felt impossible to choose. But in my case, turning Aloha down wasn't really an option. It was either do or die. Can't decide, huh? I get it, and I can't say that I'm surprised. You really love movies, don't you? I really do. Well, if that's the case, I'll give you half a day to decide. Think about it. The last movie of your life. Aloha said as he disappeared. Anyway, he chooses to get rid of... Dang. I'm dead right now? Ugh. No, Sofu. You know why you appeared? Cause you're not part of the beautiful, smart, kind, and gorgeous, intelligent, nor funny. You're neither of those traits. That's why you're still here, Sofu. Welcome back. Not knowing what to do, I decide to visit an old friend of mine. Tsutaya. Okay, I know that's weird, given the fact that Tsutaya is actually the name of the video store chain in Japan, but let me explain. I was at a complete loss over what to do, so I decided to visit an old friend of mine whom I've known since junior high. This friend, he's like a walking encyclopedia when it comes to movies, so I gave him the nickname Tsutaya. I thought he might be able to help me make my decision. Tsutaya had worked in the rental shop for over 10 years. When you add that up, he's probably spent half of his life there. And the other half watching movies. To put it bluntly, the only time Tsutaya isn't watching movies is when he's asleep. He lives for films and is probably the biggest movie geek on earth. Wait, Sofu. It was just a joke. Tsutaya and I met each other when we were in the same class during junior high. For the first 2 weeks, Tsutaya just sat alone in the corner and spoke to no one, not during class or at recess. So one day I went over and talked to him, and we became fast friends, just like that. I don't remember what made me finally break the silence. I think that this happens only 3 times, tops, in someone's life. That you meet and are drawn immediately to somebody whose personality is totally different from your own. Either you become lovers, which might have happened in my case if that person were a woman, or you become good friends. As Dookie? Wait, that's not any better. There was something about Sutaya that immediately drew me to him. Wait, so I'm just reading this. Either you become lovers, which might have happened in my case if that person were a woman, or you become good friends. Dang. After some time, we'd grown close. But despite that, Sutaya didn't say much and was too shy to look anybody in the eyes. I think our eyes might have met no more than 2 or 3 times over the course of our friendship. But I liked him anyway. Hey, get out of here. Go back to streaming. Unless you ended. Then stream again. While he was normally quiet, if he talked about movies, then suddenly the word would start pouring out of his mouth, and he'd get a sparkle in his eyes. And once he started, he could go on and on. I realized then that when a person talks about something they really love, there's a kind of thrill to listening to them. In junior high, I learned a lot about movies from Sutaya, and I would watch everything he recommended. He knew about all kinds of films, from Japanese samurai movies to Hollywood science fiction and French New Wave, even obscure indie films. His movie geekdom knew no bounds. Check it out. Look, what's good is good, he'd say, shrugging. No one knew more movie trivia than Sutaya. He could tell you what genre any film belonged to, when it was made and where, the cast and the director. It didn't matter what era or nationality we were talking about. All movies were equally interesting to him. Ultimately, what's good is good was all that mattered. As luck would have it, Sutaya and I were also in the same class in high school, so I essentially got 6 years of private tutoring in film studies for free out of him. I'd say that thanks to Sutaya, I was now an expert. But compared to him, I realize most people who say that they're movie buffs are really just fakes. I'd probably even include myself in that category. In this day and age, when all kinds of people claim that they're experts without having done more than dip a toe in a subject, Sutaya was the real thing. He was an honest-to-God, natural-born movie buff. Hardcore. I'll do that during the break. Fade. But I have to go to sleep soon. It was an 8-minute walk to the video rental shop. As usual, Sutaya was sitting behind the counter. He had become so fixed in that one position over the years that he looked like a statue of a sitting Buddha on a temple altar. From the outside looking in, it almost appeared as if the store's walls, along with the infinite number of DVDs, had shot up around him, with Sutaya anchored in the middle of it all. Sutaya, I called out as I passed through the automatic doors of the shop. Hey, long time no see. What's up? What's up? He asked, nervously, avoiding my gaze. After all these years, he still couldn't look me in the eyes, even as an adult. Look, I know this is out of the blue, but I've got some bad news, I said urgently. What's wrong? I've got terminal cancer. I'm going to die soon. Who? I could die tomorrow. No, I have to figure out what the last film I want to see before I die is going to be, and I have to decide quickly. Damn, my voice is already dying. Is speaking in a low voice bad for the voice? I'm not sure. How? Sutaya, I need your help. Can you help me decide what to watch? I could tell by his expression that dropping this monumental task on him out of the blue had left him at a bit bewildered. I felt sorry for him. Really? It's a shame, but yes, I'm afraid it's all true. Sutaya scrunched his eyes shut. He looked as if he was about to cry, or maybe he was just trying to think. And then he let out a deep breath and opened his eyes again. Rising from his place behind the counter, he wandered through the maze of shelves. Tsutaya had always been someone you could trust and rely on. If someone needed help, he got to work quickly and did whatever needed to be done without asking why. Shiki, I better not be seeing you on League or Valorant. We both scanned the shelves full of DVDs and Blu-rays. A never-ending succession of movies passed before my eyes. Realizing this would be the last time I would ever watch a film, I found myself remembering scene after scene, line after line for my favorites. Everything that happens in life can happen in a show, sings Jack Buchanan in The Bandwagon. I'm gonna start you? Alright, you're safe this time, Shiki. But could everything that had happened to me lately happen in a movie? I wondered. One day, out of nowhere, I'm diagnosed with terminal cancer and my days on this earth are numbered. Then the devil appears wearing a Hawaiian shirt and promising to make things disappear from the world, one by one in exchange for granting me one more day of life. The plot wouldn't work for a movie. It's much too fantastical, although sometimes life is stranger than fiction. There's your recap, Fade. It's all right here. I mean, if you want more specific recap, then it'll be during the break. Tsutaya searched through the section devoted to westerns. With great power comes great responsibility. Peter Parker reminds himself in Spider-Man after he discovers his superpowers. Maybe it was the same for me now that I had been making things disappear from the world in exchange for my life, which was a pretty big responsibility as well as a huge risk. Not to mention quite a stressful dilemma to have on your hands. Come to think of it, having signed on the dotted line with the devil, I was beginning to understand just what Spider-Man must have gone through. May the Force be with you. Thank you, Star Wars, and you, Jedi Knights. Now I'll be back. I know how you feel, Terminator. I want to come back to. I'm the king of the world. Whoa, okay, calm down, Leo. Life is beautiful. Now that's a load of crap. Suddenly, a voice from behind me interrupted my train of thought. Don't think, feel. I'd been completely absorbed by my own miserable thoughts when Tsutaya turned to me suddenly and spoke. In his hands is held a copy of Enter the Dragon. And Mirabu. Come on, Wonder, when you think about movies, we got Hollywood. There's a lot of Mirabus out there, surely. Don't think, feel. Tsutaya cried out again. Thank you, Tsutaya. I laughed at his suggestion. Bruce Lee's great and all, but somehow that doesn't feel like the best candidate for the last movie that I'll ever watch. I went back to thinking about my favorite lines from movies. When I buy a new book, I read the last page first. That way, in case I die before I finish, I know how it ends. So says Billy Crystal in When Harry Met Sally. Standing there, looking at the rows of DVDs, I couldn't ignore the fact that I was going to die before I had a chance to see them all. I couldn't help but think of all the movies I hadn't seen, all the meals I hadn't eaten, and all the music I'd never hear. It's the future you never get to see that you really regret missing it, most of all when you die. I realize it's strange to use the word regret about things that haven't happened yet. I couldn't stop myself from thinking, if only I could live longer. I could do this or that. It's a weird train of thought because the list of things that I wanted to do was made up of things that didn't really matter in the end. Just like all movies, I was about to make disappear completely. Just like all the movies I was about to make disappear completely. Eventually, we ended up at the shelf that held Chaplin's entire back catalog. By that point, I found that I was whispering to myself, life is a tragedy when seen in close-up, by a comedy in long shot. A dream I had earlier that morning came back to me. That's from the limelight, right? Tsutaya missed nothing. Oof, Wonder. In Limelight, the little tramp, played by Charlie Chaplin, tried to stop a ballet dancer whose hope had been dashed from committing suicide. He tells the dancer, life is a beautiful, magnificent thing, even to a jellyfish. He was right. Even jellyfish exist for a reason. Even they have meaning. And if that's the case, I wonder if perhaps movies, music, coffee, and pretty much everything else had some kind of meaning as well. Once you start down the train of thought, then all those things you once thought were unnecessary turn out to be important for one reason or another. If you're trying to separate out the scores of meaningless things in the world from everything else, you will eventually have to make a judgment about human beings. About our existence. In my case, I think that's all the movies that I've enjoyed and the memories I have of enjoying them over the years that gave my life some meaning. They've made me who I am. To live means to cry, to shout, to love, to do silly things, to feel sadness and joy, to laugh, even to experience horrible, frightening things. Beautiful songs, beautiful sceneries, nausea, people singing, planes flying across the sky, the thundering hooves of horses, mouth-watering pancakes, the endless darkness of space, cowboys firing their pistols at dawn. And next to all the movies that play on a loop inside my head sit the images of friends, lovers, and family who were with me when I watched them. There are also the countless films that I've recorded in my own imagination. The memories that run through my head that are so beautiful, they bring tears to my eyes when they replay in my mind. I've been stringing together the movies I've seen like rosary beads. All that human hope and disappointment held together by a thread. It doesn't take much to realize that all life's experience eventually add up to one big inevitability. So I guess that's all? Sutaya asked while placing Limelight in a bag and handing it to me. Yes, thanks. I don't know what's going to happen now, but Sutaya started to choke up and couldn't get any more words out. What's wrong? Sutaya put his head in his head. Put his head in his head? Sutaya put his hand... Okay. Sutaya put his head in his hands and began to cry. He cried like a baby, with tears flowing down his cheeks. It reminded me of when he would sit on the window ledge at school and look so lonely. But as I observed him sitting on his own by the window, I felt somehow like I was actually drawing strength from him. I admired how he would never do anything other than what felt most important to him, and how he had no problem doing it alone, at his own speed, and without needing validation from the people around him. Seeing him there, doing his own thing and just being himself, somehow made me feel like things would be okay. At that point in my life, nothing was really that important to me. But then when I talked to him for the first time, I realized it wasn't he who needed me, that it was I who really needed Sutaya. Good morning, Estelle. As I realized this and watched Sutaya cry in front of me, all the feelings I'd been balling up inside of me suddenly came pouring out, and I began to cry too. Thank you, I whispered. I just don't want you to stay alive, he said between sobs. Wait. Did I say I just don't want you to? I didn't say that, did I? Okay, hold up. I just want you to stay alive, he said between sobs. You did? Oh lord, I don't know why I said that. It's probably because I saw the next line that says don't, and I got it mixed up. God dang it. Well, that's awkward. Don't cry. I consoled him. It's not all that bad. You remember what they said in The Legend of 1900? I've got a good story and someone to tell it to. Right now, Sutaya. That's what you mean to me. It's because of you and all we've done together that gave my life meaning. Thank you, he said, as he carried on crying. Are you lucky we're doing a reading stream today? If this wasn't a reading stream, I'll be going off on all of you. All of you. Because this is a reading stream, I have to be nice. Heart they're fisting right now. So how'd it go? Did you decide? Oh yeah, it was a... I'd made it to the movie theater at last, where she was waiting. Yes, this is the one, I said as I handed her the DVD. Limelight, eh? Interesting. Good choice. She opened the box and then looked up at me. Stunned. There was nothing inside. Their DVD case was empty. The store always rented out DVDs to their customers in their original boxes, and every once in a while there would be a screw up like this. But how about that for timing? Sutaya, how could you do this to me? I cursed him. On the other hand, as Forrest Gump would say, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. This was so true. I won't redo that delivery. This was so true. You never do know what you're gonna get. It's pretty much the story of my life. Life is a tragedy when seen in close up, by comedy and long shot. I regret everything, by the way. What do you want to do? We've got a few films on hand here. I thought for a moment, and then came to a conclusion that, if I'm being honest, I realized quite some time ago. What's the last film you'd want to watch? The answer was quite simple, really. I walked into the theater and sat down. 4th row from the back, 3rd from the right. This was our spot all through college. Okay, action. Her voice rang out from the projection room. The show began. Light projected onto the screen, but there was nothing there but a blank space. A rectangle of white light illuminating the screen. I had chosen nothing. How profound. As I gazed at the blank screen, I remembered a photograph I once saw. It was a picture of the inside of a movie theater. The photo was taken from the projection room and showed the seats in the screen. The photograph had captured one entire film and was taken by opening the shutter at the beginning of the film, and then not closing it again until the film ended. In other words, the photograph recorded an entire 2-hour-long film. The end result of absorbing the light from every scene in the movie was that the screen in the photo showed nothing but a white rectangle. Wonder you are... A burning house is completely different than choosing a movie. Get out of here with that wonder. I suppose you could say that my life is like that photograph. A movie that shows my whole life would include both comedy and tragedy. All the joy, anger, and sorrow I've been through, the result of which would be nothing more than a blank screen. There's nothing there, nothing left. Only an empty space. Sometimes when you rewatch a film after not having seen it for a long time, it makes a totally different impression on you than it did the first time you saw it. Of course, the movie hasn't changed. It's you who has changed. And seeing the same film again makes that impossible to forget. If my life were a film, it would have to find a way of depicting my evolving perspective. How I see my own life has changed over time. I would feel affection for scenes that I'd hated before and laugh during scenes where I originally cried. A past love interest is now long forgotten. What I'm remembering now are all the good times that I had with parents. Only the good times, like when I was 3 years old and my parents took me to the movies for the first time. We saw E.T. It was pitch black inside the theater and the sound was so loud I remember the theater was filled with buttery, salty smell of popcorn. On my right sat my father and on my left was my mother, sandwiched between my parents and the dark theater. I couldn't have escaped even if I wanted to, so I just looked up at the huge screen and watched. I remember almost nothing about the movie. The only part I remember is that scene where the boy Elliot rides through the sky with E.T. and in the basket on the front of his bike. It's a powerful memory. Hey, I remember wanting to cheer and cry all at once. It seems to me that feeling is what movies are all about. I can still remember the impression it made on me. I was overwhelmed. I held on tight to my father's hand, and he squeezed mine in return. A few years ago, a digitally remastered version of E.T. was showing on late night television. I hate watching movies on TV with the constant interruption from ads, so I was about to turn it off. But once I started watching, I was hooked. About 20 years had gone by since I'd first seen the film, but I still found myself as moved by the same scenes as I had been as a child. I couldn't stop myself from crying, but despite my reaction, that didn't mean that the experience was exactly the same as it had been when I was 3 years old. For one thing, more than 20 years later, I knew I'd never fly through the air like they do in the movie. Also, it had been years since I last spoke to my father, who, back then when I was 3, had sat next to me holding my hand tightly. Meanwhile, my mother, who sat on my left, was no longer of this world. What is he thinking was this fucking... You got a good point. Like, man, just get rid of music. Get rid of smartphone and music. Get rid of League of Legends while you're at it. So I suppose I now know 2 things that I didn't know then. I can't fly, and what I had back then is now gone forever. What did I do? What did I gain by growing up, and what did I lose? I know the answer to only the second part of the question. Innocence. All those precious hopes and dreams that you can only have when you're in your adolescence. Sitting alone in the movie theater staring at the blank screen, I started to think, if my life were a movie, what kind of movie would it be? Would it be a comedy, a thriller, or maybe more of a drama? Whatever it would be, it definitely wouldn't be a romantic comedy. Toward the end of his life, Charlie Chaplin said something to the effect of, I may not have been able to produce a masterpiece, but I made people laugh. That can't be all that bad, can it? And Fellini once said, talking about dreams is like talking about movies, since the cinema uses the language of dreams. Both Chaplin and Fellini created masterpieces, made people laugh, made them dream, and gave them memories. But the more I thought about it, the more difficulty I had in imagining an appropriate adaptation of my life for the big screen. As I stared at the blank screen, I tried to imagine what my movie would be like. For a director, there's a film crew, and the cast is made up of my family, friends, and former lovers. The opening scene is set 30 years ago when I am born. On screen are my infant self and my parents smiling down at me. Relatives gather around and all take turns holding the new baby, squeezing his hand and pinching his cheeks. Soon, the new baby learns to turn over, crawls, then stands up on his own, and before you know it, he begins to walk, subjected to the same hopes and fears as all new parents. My mother and father take to their roles with gusto, feeding and clothing the baby, and frantically trying to keep him happy and entertained. Risa. Is it possible to imagine a healthier and more normal start in life? Our opening scenes couldn't be happier. But then, as anger, tears, and laughter flit across the screen, I gradually grow up. I talk less and less to my father. Who knows why, after all the time we spent together? I've never figured it out myself. Then one day a cat arrives in our home. His name is Lettuce. There are lots of happy times between Mom, Lettuce, and me. But Lettuce eventually grows old and dies, so next we get Cabbage and things are okay for a little while. But then my mother dies. Cut to the most tragic scene in the film. Cabbage and I are left behind. We decide to go on living together. My father is out of the picture at this point. I start working as a postman, and normal everyday life continues. Goes on. But this is boring. I realize this is just scene after scene of mundane details and lines after the trivial dialogue. but a low budget movie. And on top of all that, the star of the show, me, doesn't show any signs of having a goal in life or values of any kind. He's an apathetic guy, completely lacking in spirit and is of no interest at all to the audience. Obviously, this film would never work if it showed my life exactly as I lived it. The script would have to be written in a hyper-real, in-your-face kind of style, with more of a sense of theater, a dramatization. Sets could be simple and pared back, but they'd have to have a certain flavor to them. Props would be picked out to add to a sense of atmosphere, and costumes would all come in black and white. And what about editing? The scenes are still pretty boring, so they'll need a good amount of editorial work. But if the editor goes too far, we'll only be left with like 5 minutes of film that won't work. Now we keep talking about this being a movie and never mentioning book. Maybe never mentioning book. Yep. We get you yourself. It would be a good idea to start by taking a careful look back through the text. Completely unnecessary scenes run way too long, and scenes that we really want to see end right at the point when they're just starting to get good. But that's pretty much what my life has been like. And what about the soundtrack? Let's see. Maybe a nice simple melody played on piano, or to go in another direction, perhaps something grand and stately with a full orchestra? No, let's try something more relaxed, like an acoustic guitar. But whatever we choose, I have only one request, that during the sad scenes, upbeat music should play in the background. And I also do, oh my gosh. Now work on the film is done. It's a quiet, low-key production and probably won't be a box office smash. Its release will be pretty subdued, and it's likely to go mostly unnoticed. It'll probably be the kind of film that goes to video quickly, and is forgotten in a corner of the rental shop. The colors on its box fading. The last scene ends and the screen goes dark. Then the credits roll. If my life were a movie, I'd want it to be memorable in some way, no matter how modest the production was. I'd hope it would mean something to someone, somehow, that would give them a boost and spur them on. After the credits, life does go on. My hope is that my life will go on to live in the memories of others who've witnessed my story. Oh, whoops, sorry about that. Like, why only make his life into a movie instead of a book? It's too okay, whatever. But yeah, it's because it's a movie, because they're getting rid of movies next, and I guess he likes, and he's a film buff, he loves movies, because they're getting rid of movies. For his last film, he's watching a blank screen on the theater projector or whatever. He's looking at the movie, which is just like a white rectangle, and he's using that time to reflect on his life and imagine his movie on the screen. And awesome. It was a long it was a long ramble. Okay, action. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5 pages of rambling. It was long, but it was nice. It was a nice reflection, I guess. Yapping. Okay, Sofu, you're sick. You know what? I don't want to get rid of movies. I want to get rid of Shrek movies only. Not the Shrek movies, I'll get rid of the Shrek franchise. The 2-hour screening came to an end. We stepped outside the theater, where the quiet and darkness enveloped us. Do you feel sad? She asked as we exited the theater. I don't know. I guess it must be rough on you. I'm not sure, sorry. I really don't know how I feel right now. I actually didn't know. I wasn't sure if I was sad because I was going to die or if I was sad because something really important and meaningful was about to disappear from the world. You can come back and see me anytime, you know. If you ever feel bad, if you're ever in so much pain that you can't stand it. Her words reached me just as I was about to turn away to leave. Hopefully you're sick. Thank you, I said, and headed up the hill towards home. Wait, she shouted from behind me. One more quiz. Not again. Just one more. This is the last question. As she spoke, I realized that tears had welled up in her eyes and were beginning to spill over. Seeing her cry made me feel like crying as well. Okay, I agreed. I'll give it one last go. Whenever I see a movie with a sad ending, I always will rewatch it at least one more time. Do you remember why? This time, I knew the answer. It's one thing that I remembered well about her. It's something I was hoping would happen during the plane ride back from Buenos Aires, and even for a while after we broke up. Yes, I know, I responded. So, what's your answer? Because you're hoping that maybe it will have a happy ending the next time around. Right, that's it. She wiped her eyes roughly with her sleeve and giving me a big wave, she shouted, "May the force be with you." Man, what geeks. That's kinda cute. To which I responded while holding back tears. I'll be back. Okay. Star Wars into Terminator reference. I never watched Terminator. I've never watched Star Wars. I never watched Charlie Chaplin. I've never watched any of these. I'm gonna start knowing these quotes because of this book. When I got back home, Aloha was waiting for me, sporting a big grin. He gave me his word, squint, wink, and with that, movies disappeared. In that moment, I thought about one of my mother's favorite movies. It was an Italian movie by Fellini called La Strada. The story went like this. Gelsomina, a naive young woman, is sold by her impoverished mother to a brutish circus strongman, Zampano. I'm getting this complete. I'm butchering all these names. Wants Gelsomina for his wife and partner. She remains loyal despite the abuse she suffers at Zampano's hands as they travel the Italian countryside performing together. Eventually, Gelsomina grows weaker, and when the abuse becomes intolerable, she begins to physically waste away, so Zampano abandons her. A few years later, the traveling circus arrives in a seaside town and Zampano hears a young woman sing a song that Gelsomino used to sing. Zampano finds out that Gelsomino has died, but her song lives on. Listening to the young woman sing Gelsomina's song, Zampano realizes that he really loved her. He walks to the shore and collapses in tears on the beach. Crying won't bring her back, but in the end he realized that although he really did love her, he was incapable of treating her as though he did when they were together. There's no way. What is this? You only realize what the really important things are once you've lost them. That's what my mother would say at the end of La Strada. It seems like the same thing was happening to me now. I was genuinely sad now that I actually lost movies. I knew I would miss them and I knew it's stupid. But it was only when I realized that the movies were really gone that it hit me how much they'd helped me emotionally, and how much they'd have had a hand in making me who I was. But, as I've said, living was more important. The devil picked that exact moment to announce in his usual cheerful manner the next item he'd chosen to make disappear. I was so depressed at the time that I agreed to it without really thinking. Okay, a cliffhanger? That's insane. We're ending the reading here on this cliffhanger. I'm kidding. I'm gonna take a break and then we'll read at least 30 more pages. But probably, I'm gonna try to keep it 30, but we'll... Thursday. A world without clocks. I'm fully here. That's unfortunate. I mean, hello. It's funny how one strange thing is often followed by another. Like when you lose your keys and then you invariably end up losing your wallet. Or in a baseball game when your team's down almost the entire game, but then someone hits a home run, followed by another, and another. As for me, I get diagnosed with terminal. I'm sorry, wait. I'm not laughing. Okay, I did laugh at that. The guy can't just make these like analogies and then just say, as for me, it's terminal cancer. He can't just say okay. Okay, I'm sorry. As for me, I get diagnosed with terminal cancer. The devil appears, phones and movies disappear from the world, and the next thing I know, the cat starts talking. That's so crazy. That's a crazy lead-in. Excuse me, sir, but why are you still sleeping? I had to be dreaming. Rise and shine, you must get up this instant. I had to be a dream. Come now, up with you. But no, it wasn't a dream. He was actually talking, and the he who was speaking was definitely Cabbage. And for some strange reason, he sounds so refined. What exactly was going on? A bit confused, are we? Aloha appeared in the room with that big grin on his face. Today he wore a tacky sky blue Hawaiian shirt that again made me want to tell him to put on some real clothes. In keeping with the flamboyant style I'd come to expect from him, the brightly colored shirt featured parakeets and huge, swirly lollipops. It was so bright it made my eyes hurt. It was not exactly the most pleasant sight to wake up to. Aloha was beginning to piss me off, so I snapped at him. Come on, man, what are you doing? I wake up and the cat's not meowing, but instead he's talking? He sounds like royalty. Seriously, what's going on here? My, aren't we spirited this morning? Well, it is just a little something extra from me to you. Something extra? Oh, my voice is dying. That's right. After all, there are no more phones, and the movies that you once loved watching so much are all gone. So I thought you might need a little something to cheer you up, like someone to talk to or a new hobby or something. So I thought I'd try making the cat talk. I just happen to dabble in magic, you know? I am the devil after all. But having the cat start to talk out of nowhere is a bit, disconcerting, I guess? Can you get him to stop? Aloha felt silent. Did I say something wrong? He remained tight-lipped. Please don't tell me this is something that I can't fix. That you can't fix. Like something you can't undo once it's been done. Well, no, that's not it. I mean, I can put things back. Or should I say, it'll all go back to normal eventually. It's just a question of timing. But I don't really know when. I mean, I'm not God, you know. I'm just the devil. How about if I just smack her head against the wall? I thought, but instead I swallowed my words and burrowed deeper under the covers. A world with no movies and where cats talk was not a world I wanted to wake up in. I feel like if cats talked, it would just be smack talking, y'all. Cabbage started to walk on my face. He'd always do this to wake me up. I was never much of a morning person. I once heard that the origin of the Japanese word for cat, neko, is actually sleeping child. But there's no way that can be true. Cabbage never sleeps in late. He's always up late and harassing me. I shall be most put out if you don't get up soon, Cabbage rattled on, letting out a loud moan that sounded distinctly cat-like. That's it, I can't take this anymore, I grumbled, throwing off the covers. Reality, it seemed, would not leave me alone. I gathered what energy I could and got out of bed. Oh, and just to check, Aloha inquired, thrusting his face close to mine as he spoke. You do remember, don't you? What do you mean? Well, I'm erasing today, of course. I had no memory at all of what was supposed to be. What had he made disappear? What was next on the list? Looking around the room, I saw nothing different. Sorry, I don't remember. What was it? Honestly, what am I going to do with you? It's clocks. Man, clocks. Wait, am I trolling? Or did he mention his dad working at a clock shop? I forgot the word for that, but I might be trolling. Clocks? That's right, today you erased clocks. Now I remember. If clocks disappeared from the world, how would the world be different? I thought about it for a while. The first thing, oh no, he like worked on wristwatches, I think. At this point, just looked at the double juice room. It's not fair, okay? He got taken advantage of when he was sad, okay? The first thing I thought of was my father. I could see him in my mind's eye, hunched over working his shop, you see. My father ran a small clock shop, okay, I was right. The ground floor of the house I grew up in was my father's workshop. Whenever I went downstairs, I would see him bent over his workbench in the semi-darkness with a desk lamp shining over his workspace, repairing clocks. I hadn't seen my father in 4 years. My father in 4 years. I imagined that he was probably still at it, repairing clocks in that tiny shop tucked away in the corner of that little town. If clocks were to disappear from the world, there would be no more need for clock repair shops. No need for that little shop, nor my father's skills. When I thought of it that way, I started to feel guilty. But had clocks really disappeared from the world? I wondered. It seemed hard to believe that they would all disappear so suddenly. I looked around the room. My wristwatch was definitely gone, and a small alarm clock I had sitting on my nightstand was nowhere to be found. But was it like when phones disappeared? I wondered maybe I'd simply stopped seeing them. But whatever had happened, practically speaking, had suddenly disappeared. Practically speaking, they had indeed disappeared from this world. Then I realized, without clocks, how would I have any sense of time? It looked and felt like morning to me, and since I was pretty sure I had slept a bit, I figured it was probably around 11 AM. When I turned on the TV, the time didn't show up on the screen as it usually did, and of course, phones had already disappeared, so I couldn't rely on that. I truly had no idea what time it was. And yet, I didn't really feel any different. Why was that? This was different from when I'd made the other things disappear. Other than the few pangs of guilt I felt when I thought of my father, I felt no pain, no sense of loss. Shouldn't this have a pretty huge impact on the world? Clocks are essentially what makes the world go round. Sundials and hourglasses work? Yeah. Can they just use that instead? But even then, like... Schools and businesses, public transport, the stock market, and all other public services must be in chaos. But for someone like me who lives on his own, well, plus one cat, there wasn't really much of a difference. It seemed like we were getting along just fine going about our normal lives without clocks. So much of an exact sense of time at all. It really didn't seem to make any difference. So why are there clocks in the first place, I thought Aloha might know. That's a good question. Before clocks were invented, it was only humans who had a sense of time. Huh? I don't get it. Seeing I was puzzled, Aloha went on. Okay, stay with me. You see, time, or the thing we call time, is simply produced by arbitrarily determined rules. Rules that human beings made up. I'm not saying that a cycle of sun rising and setting doesn't exist as a natural phenomenon, because obviously it does. But it's humans who have imposed an organizational system on that process and called it time, giving names and numbers to different parts of the day, like 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock, midnight, and so on. Yeah, whatever, Shiki. Next time, if I ever catch you on League, I am yelling at you to offset what happened today. Have a good one, Shiki. Good night. Okay, I see. So human beings may think that they're looking at the world as it's supposed to be, but they've got it all wrong. In fact, they've just imposed a meaning on something and come up with a definition for what the world is supposed to be, all about in a way that just happened to suit them. And I just thought it might be interesting for people to see what the world would be like without that pesky system of telling the time that humans just made up for their own convenience. You know, just to mix it up a bit. Shiki, don't talk to me. Go to sleep. Oh, so just like that, huh? Just because you felt like it? Yeah, well, that's what this is all about, right? Listen, I gotta go. But you have yourself a great day. Oh, wait, that's right. There's no such thing as a day anymore. And then Aloha disappeared. His glib, parting words still hang in the air. The story of the last 100 years could probably fit onto one page of a history book. Or maybe only a line would do. When I found out that I didn't have much time left, I decided I'd try thinking of an hour, not just as 60 minutes, but as 3,600 seconds, just to make myself feel better. But since clocks had now disappeared, counting seconds didn't mean anything anymore. Even the meaning of words like today or Sunday had become dubious. But after Wednesday comes Thursday, and since I knew it was morning, that meant that today must be Thursday. I had to remind myself not to forget these days of the week are only arbitrary human inventions. In any case, I didn't have anything to do on this particular day, so I thought I'd just kill some time, even though there was no time to kill. Even if I had decided to waste time, there was no time to waste either. This really left me with very little to go on. Okay, you guys are getting way too happy in chat. No happiness, okay? No white people happy, no people happy, no nothing. How many minutes had passed since I woke up? I had usually glanced at the alarm clock by my bed when I first woke up, but now there was no clocks. A world without clocks. I was being pulled along in the endless undercurrent of time. I couldn't see it, but I could feel myself being dragged out of who knows where. After a while, it felt as if I was being drawn back into the past. Every day, people sleep, wake up, work, and eat, according to the established set of rules we call time. In other words, we set our lives by the clock. Human beings went through the trouble of inventing rules and imposed limits on their lives, boxing them up into hours, days, and years, and then they invented clocks to make time's rule over us even more precise. Oh my gosh. The fact that we have these rules mean that we've given up some of our freedom, and yet we've surrounded ourselves with reminders of that loss of freedom by hanging clocks on walls and dotting them around our house. And as if that weren't enough, we make sure that there's a clock wherever we go, no matter what we're doing. Is this right? No matter what we're doing. That's not right, right? Whatever. Well, maybe. No matter what we are doing. We've even felt the need to wrap our bodies up in time by going so far as to wrap it around our wrists. I was like, is this like a secret, like, did like a new English patch note? Did a patch note for English just like come out that I didn't notice? I forgot to read? But now I think I'm beginning to understand. With freedom comes uncertainty, insecurity, and anxiety. Human beings exchange their freedom for the sense of security that comes from living by set rules and routines, despite knowing that they pay the cost of these rules and regulations with their freedom. Hold up, someone woke up in the house. Actually, yeah, only you're not. Ain't no way. Yeah, should be fine. While I was pondering this, Cabbage sidled up close to me. Usually when Cabbage comes over and shows me affection, it's because he wants something. What's wrong, Cabbage? Are you hungry? That's usually what he wants first thing in the morning. No, that is not at all what I want. Okay then. I was still struggling to believe that the cat was talking back to me. Cabbage let out a deep sigh. Sir, yeah, once again completely failed to understand correctly. Sir? I asked. Apparently he meant me. What's that all about? How far was he going to take this gentleman bit? If you'll permit me to explain, when I want to go for a stroll, you always think I want to eat. When I do in fact want to eat, you think I want to rest or take a nap, if you will, and when it is a nap that I desire, you believe I wish to play with you. Your judgment is always, if I may say so, just a touch off. Oh really, is that so? The cat nodded and continued. Yes, it is so. You behave as if you have an understanding of my kind, when in fact you do not understand cats at all. You ask me if I am sad when I am not sad, and see fit to approach me with that purlingly sweet voice. I do wish you'd stop that. Although, to be fair, you're not the only one who does this. All humans are this way. Okay, no wonder he wants to get rid of cats. I'm kidding. I was shocked. I lived with Cabbage for 4 years, and I thought we understood each other perfectly. It can be a rude awakening when a cat starts to speak your language. I'm sorry, Cabbage. So what is it you do want to do? I would like to go for a walk. Cabbage had loved taking walks since he was a kitten. This cat's just like a dog, Mom would laugh as she'd take Cabbage out on one of his many walks. I agreed and told him to give me a minute to get ready, and went to the bathroom. I was midway through relieving myself, when suddenly, I heard the door handle being fiddled with. Then the door swung open and Cabbage barged in. Come now, hurry, let's go. Alright already, I thought as I pushed Cabbage out of the bathroom and finished my business. I then went to the sink to wash my hands and face. As I was splashing water onto my face, I could feel Cabbage's eyes on me, willing me to go faster. When I looked over my shoulder, I saw him watching me intently from the shadows. Oh, do come on, I am quite ready for a walk, he complained. Okay, Cabbage, just wait a sec. It used to be that meow was enough to get this message across, but now he was actually talking to me and it was really becoming a pain. I took my clothes off quickly and jumped in the shower. As I was washing my hair, I sensed something behind me, like a ghost. It felt like I was in a horror film. Chills ran down my spine. I had my eyes closed right to keep the suds out of them until I finished rinsing my hair. When I opened them, I noticed the shower door was ajar and Cabbage was peering inside. Let's go, he snapped. Are you a stalker or something? I wanted to shout, but managed to keep the thought to myself. Instead, I slammed the door shut and finished rinsing my hair. When I finished showering, I made a simple breakfast for myself, just a banana and some milk, then quickly got dressed. You what? Wait, what? Is it take my clothes off quickly part fade? Hey, leave me alone. Really? I must insist. Open the door this instant. I wish to go out. Cabbage was in the small entryway to the apartment. Leave me alone, y'all. Scratching at the door with his claws. I was more or less ready, so I finally opened the front door and we left for Cabbage's walk. The weather outside was beautiful. A perfect day for a stroll. Cabbage walked ahead of me with a spring in his step. Mom was always going out on walks with Cabbage, which made me realize that maybe Cabbage got to know a part of her that I never got to see. This somehow made me feel closer to her. I relaxed at this thought and decided that I would take it easy and spend the day enjoying Cabbage's company. As I walked, it suddenly occurred to me when Cabbage had learned to speak like an upper-class gentleman. It was Mom's influence, of course. Around the time Cabbage first came to live with us as a kitten, Mom suddenly got into period dramas on television. She would watch popular long-running series and declare that all men should be more like this, and espouse outdated theories about masculinity. Cabbage, when I say cave, when I say cabbage, is that my accent? As I walked, it suddenly occurred to me, where Cabbage— oh yeah, I read that. She tried to get me to take part in her historical drama obsession. Sorry, Mom, but I really prefer films to TV shows. I'd politely refuse. Cabbage must have learned human language from the hours he spent curled up on Mom's lap watching shows together. That's why Cabbage's Japanese was an odd mixture of my mother's expressions and period TV dramas. It was kind of odd sounding and yet kind of cute at the same time, so I decided that I wouldn't correct him. This is what was going through my head as I followed behind him. Why do you leave Cabbage alone? The route we strolled down was overgrown with weeds, but here and there wildflowers bloomed. I noticed at the foot of a telephone pole some dandelion flowers flowered inconspicuously, which served as a reminder that spring was on its way. Cabbage walked up to the flowers and smelled them. Dandelions, I pointed out. When I said the word, Cabbage made me a face. One would call these dandelions, he asked. Didn't you know? No. They're flowers that blooms in spring. Ah, I see. Cabbage went on to sniff every flower we passed along the roadside, asking after each one. And what might one call this? And this one? There were endless varieties of wildflowers growing by the path, and Cabbage wanted to know each and every one of them. Vetch, shepherd's purse, common fleabane, Marguerite, Paris daisy, henbit, and so on. The flowers we walked past were exposed to a north wind and completely dependent on what little warmth they could get from the sun. At that time of year, they were in full bloom. I trod my memory to try and remember the names of the flowers so I could teach them to Cabbage. It was strange how the names were able to resurface. These memories from my childhood from all those years ago. Like Cabbage when I was young, I used to take walks with my mother. And I would ask her these same questions too. What do you call that? And that. Wait, hold up. I'm gonna look ahead and see how many chapters or how many pages are left. 126 is where we're gonna stop, so 20 more pages. I'm not gonna lie, I'm getting very sleepy, but I think we can get through it. I might need to take another break after 10 pages. I'm not sure, we'll see. Oh god, hold on, I'm gonna try to get my legs under the table. Straighten my back. Take all the breaks you need, yeah, we'll see. Alright. I suppose I was just like him. Do you think my mom spent her days like this, putting up with my endless questions, and then later putting up with it again from Cabbage? Stop AOing. You'd find a flower and then sit down to study it. Then you'd find another flower and sit down again. Our walks would last forever. It's not easy taking care of a small child, my mother told me once I'd grown up. But those were happy times all the same. She'd get that faraway look in her eyes when she talked nostalgically about the past, then that little laugh. Having taken our time, Cabbage and I finally reached the park at the top of the hill. There was a beautiful view from there. Just below us, we could see the road we'd hiked up, lined with houses, and beyond that was a sea of the color of lapis lazuli. Within the park was a playground with a swing set, a slide, and a seesaw for kids. Mothers played with their children in the sandbox. Cabbage circled the park, played with a bit with the kids, and then headed toward a row of benches from where old men played Japanese chess. "Shove over, I'm sitting here," he announced while making space for himself. I was worried that the sudden appearance of a talking cat would frighten the old men, but they just smiled and laughed. Apparently, I was the only one who could hear Cabbage speaking. "No, Cabbage," I warned. "These people are using the bench now," but Cabbage was having none of it. Suddenly, he jumped up onto the chessboard and the pieces went flying in all directions. Surprisingly, the old men just laughed it off and acted like this was something that happened all the time. They ended up ceding their spot to Cabbage. Ain't no way. I would be furious. I hung my head apologetically as the old men gathered up their belongings and left. Cabbage gave me a side glance and positioned himself on the wooden bench, from which ribbons of blue paint were peeling off, and started licking his paws. It looked like he wasn't going anywhere for a while, so I sat down beside him and gazed absent-mindedly at the ocean, which extended as far as the eye could see. I wondered if this perfectly peaceful moment might last forever. I looked over at the park's clock tower to check the time. As I tended to do, as I suspected, there was no clock. Was the disappearance of time responsible for this peaceful calm, or had it always been this way? I couldn't tell. Now that I had finally come to terms with the fact that clocks no longer existed, I felt light and free. Humans are strange creatures. Cabbage must have finished grooming himself. He looked in my direction as he spoke. What's that? Why do humans give flowers names? Because there are so many different kinds. Without names, you wouldn't be able to differentiate between them. Just because there are different kinds doesn't mean you have to name each and every single one. Why not just call them all flowers? Isn't that good enough? I suppose he had a point. Why do people name flowers anyways? And not only flowers, we give names to all kinds of objects. Colors have names, and so do people. Why do we need names? It's the same with time. The sun rises and sets. Humans went ahead and had to impose their own order on a naturally recurring phenomenon. Years, months, hours, minutes, seconds. Every moment has its name, and there is no escaping the system. Cabbage, on the other hand, existed in a world without time. No clocks, no schedules, and no being late. For him, there was no such thing, or what year they were in school, and he had no concept of vacations because there was nothing to have a vacation from in the first place. He responded only to the changes brought about by natural phenomena or biological factors like when he's hungry or sleepy. In a world without clocks, I could really take my time to think about things in a deep way. It seemed to me that there were all kinds of rules made up by human beings, rules that begin to fall apart when you examine them closely. I eventually came to the realization that the ways we have of measuring things like, say, temperature, or the reflectance of light that produces color are artificial human creations. Just like time, basically humans just apply labels to the things they sense. From the perspectives of the non-human world, hours, minutes, and seconds don't exist. Nor do colors like red, yellow, and blue. But on the other hand, if yellow and red don't exist, that doesn't mean that Cabbage doesn't think dandelions are pretty or that roses are beautiful. You know, Cabbage, it was really sweet of Mom to go along on these long walks with you. How so? Spending all that time with you was a big deal for her. Mom was extremely fond of you. Mom, you say? Yes. My mother. Well, I guess she was kind of your mother too. Exactly who is this person you refer to as mother? I was shocked. Cabbage must have somehow forgotten all about Mom. That's impossible, I thought. I began to wonder if maybe he'd made himself forget about her for some reason. I remember my mother's face the day she rescued Cabbage. She looked exhausted, and yet she was also so happy. She would watch TV with him, curled up on her lap, stroking his fur until he fell asleep. Then she would eventually fall asleep herself, cuddled up with Cabbage on the sofa. She would look so peaceful like that, I got choked up just thinking about it. Don't you remember, Mom? I asked. Who is this you speak of? Cabbage looked like he had no idea what the hell I was talking about. He must have truly forgotten her. Cabbage's complete ignorance made me so sad. Somewhere deep down, I always believe in those stories about pets that never forget their masters. Like in the story of Hachiko, who for years waited at the station for his master to come home, not realizing his master had died. But I wonder if stories like those are just tales of wishful thinking on the part of humans. Will Cabbage forget about me too? Will there come a day when I disappear from Cabbage's world? Mothers, do stop that. This made me realize I had to cherish every moment I had left to live. Everything began to feel very meaningful and important. With the time I had left, how many more walks would I be able to take with Cabbage? How many more times would I be able to listen to my favorite songs? Enjoy a cup of coffee or a good meal? Say good morning, sneeze, or laugh? I never thought about life this way before. It hadn't crossed my mind during any of my visits with my mother. If I realized that someday it would all have to end, I would have appreciated that time I spent with her more. But before I knew it, my mom was gone, and she had left before any of this had occurred to me. Had I done anything significant during my 30-year existence, I wondered. Had I spent time with the people whom I really wanted to spend time with? Had I said all that needed to be said to the people who mattered? Did I call my mother as much as I should have? I got so caught up with all the little everyday tasks that I ended up wasting the time that I could have been spending on more important things. But the scariest thing is that I never even noticed that I was wasting my own precious time. Is waiting to leave as it comes. If only I'd stopped for a moment to get some perspective, away from all that running around I was doing. It would have been obvious that what the most important thing was, and which of those phone calls I needed to make, if any, really mattered. I glanced over at Cabbage. While I was lost in thought, he curled up and gone to sleep on the bench, with his 4 white paws tucked in and folded underneath his black and gray fur. He looked like a perfectly round kitten. I stroked him and felt his little heart beating underneath my hand. I was in awe that such a life force flowed through the small creature as he laid there so still, sleeping peacefully. Oh, yeah, he's sleeping. I want to sleep too. I can't wait to sleep after this. I'd heard somewhere that a mammal's heart beat about 2 billion times during his lifetime. For example, The life expectancy of an elephant is about 50 years. For horses, it's 20 years, and cats, 10 years. While a mouse will last only for about 2 years. But whatever the average lifespan, each animal's heart beats around 2 billion times. The average life expectancy of a human being is 70 years. I wonder if my heart had beaten 2 billion times yet. Best taping ever, remember, Lofi? What do you mean, remember? Get away! Wait, cracking my knuckles? I lived up my entire life until this point as if there was no tomorrow. But once I discovered that my life would indeed end soon, it seemed as if the future that was set in stone was rushing to come meet me. Or at least that's how I felt. How ironic, I thought. For the first time in my life, I was finally taking a long, hard look in my future, but only after being told that I didn't have long left to live. The right side of my head began to throb, and I was finding it difficult to breathe again. I didn't want to die yet. I wanted to go on living. I thought about how tomorrow I'd once again have to make something disappear from the world. I would have to strip something else away from my future so that I might continue to live. Leave me alone, y'all. As time passed, the park emptied of children and the sun arced through the sky, moving farther and farther west. When Cabbage finally woke up, he stretched as far as he could without falling off the bench and let out a great yawn, which he seemed to have taken his time recovering from. He blinked at me lazily. I say, shall we go now? He said, as if he were addressing no one in particular. Still groggy from just having woken up, he spoke in a slightly condescending tone, and he jumped down from the bench and sauntered off in his usual jaunty stride. He headed off toward the street that led to the station and through the shopping district. He stopped in front of the soba shop and gave a loud meow. The shop owner emerged with a handful of bonito flakes left over from the day's batch of soup stock, which they served with the noodles. Once he polished off his winnings, Cabbage licked his chops and walked off, muttering, "Excellent," under his breath as he went. It seemed like Cabbage had become quite the local celebrity in the shopping district. Wherever he went, people who knew him shouted hello. With this kind of thing happening, it was difficult to tell between the two of us who was the master and who was the pet. But it seemed to me that I somehow became the servant of a lofty speaking cat. However, one benefit of Cabbage's popularity was that the shopkeepers offered their fish and vegetables and everything else to me at a discounted price. Who would have thought that there was such a thing as a cat discount? That's really cute. From now on, I'm always going shopping with you, I told Cabbage, carrying as many shopping bags as I could in each hand. Yes, that's all very well. Now you'll be able to make me a meal that I might actually enjoy. But that's what I always do, I protested. What about the cat food that I always feed you? Fancy feast. Cabbage skipped a little ahead of me, then stopped dead in his tracks in front of me. What's wrong? I asked, looking down at him. He looked pretty angry. Regarding the so-called fancy feast, there's something I've always been wanting to tell you for some time now. Go ahead, tell me, what is it? Just what exactly is this stuff you call fancy feast anyway? What do you mean? It seems to me that it's just a hodgepodge of table scraps and other questionable material you humans have thrown together and given a pretty name to. Cabbage looked as if he were about to burst with frustration, then let out a gruff yowl. He walked over to a nearby telephone pole and began sharpening his claws by digging them into the wood. Oh god, he's about to kill him. All this time, I never realized how much he hated what I'd been feeding him, which got me thinking about all the customs we humans have made up. Coming to the end of our stroll, I spotted our little apartment in the distance down the hill from where we were. When we arrived at home, we ate some grilled fish together. The real stuff. No more fancy feast for Cabbage. We try to stuff crust. And continued our quiet and relaxing day together. So, Cabbage. Yes, what is it? Have you really forgotten all about Mom? I don't recall a thing. That's so sad. How so? I didn't know how to explain to Cabbage why it was so sad. At the same time, I couldn't blame him for forgetting about her either. I wanted to share a good solid memory that he'd remember about Mom. After all, the time they spent together was real. There was no denying it had happened. So I went over to a closet and pulled out an old cardboard box. Inside the dust-covered box was a maroon photo album that I wanted to show to Cabbage. Estelle, you are sick. What the heck? Cabbage crust? That is disgusting. crusty cabbage. I turned the page and shared with him stories about each photo. I showed him a photo of the old rocking chair that Mom used to sit in with him, rocking back and forth with him on her lap. This is you, Cabbage. This is where you always sat. And this is the ball of yarn you like so much. You played here for hours on. You're terrifying. Hours on end. And here's the worn out old tin bucket where you used to curl up and go to sleep. I remember you peering out from it at Mom. And there's that old green towel you like. It was Mom's favorite, but you adopted it. Then there's the little toy piano that Mom bought you for Christmas. What a picture. Here you were playing on it. You were a bit rough with it, but what a performance. And then this one is of the Christmas tree. I remember every year when Mom decorated the tree, you get too excited and tear each ornament down as soon as she hung it up. Poor Mom. She'd always have such a hard time getting the Christmas tree finished. Oh, and this one. This one's you jumping out of the Christmas tree. And surprising Mom. What a mess. You're really something, Cabbage. Look at Mom. She's happy in all these pictures. When we finished one album, we opened up another, and I continued sharing stories with Cabbage. I told him about Lettuce and that rainy day when he first came to live with us, and about how when Lettuce died, Mom just sort of shut down. She wouldn't move or go out. Then I told Cabbage about the day she found him, and all the happy days that came after that. I also told him how Mom got sick. Cabbage sat quietly and listened closely to every word of my stories. Every once in a while, I asked him if he remembered any of these things, but he seemed to have forgotten everything. Then suddenly, looking at one photo, his eyes lit up. It was a snapshot of the early morning sky at a beautiful spot on the coast. In the picture, I'm wearing a light, informal summer kimono known as yukata. Mom and Dad are in the photo with me. We're pushing Mom in a wheelchair, and on her lap sits Cabbage with a grumpy look on his face. Dad and I are laughing though, and have a hint of embarrassment in our faces. Seeing Dad's face and mine frozen in laughter was an unusual sight, and it caught my eye. Who is this? Cabbage asked with interest. It was the first time Dad had appeared in any of the pictures. That's my father, I responded curtly. I didn't want to talk about him. Where was this picture taken? I think it was taken at the hot spring we visited together. There was a date printed on the photo. It was taken only a week before Mom died. Mom was hospitalized and couldn't move around on her own anymore. I continued. But then one day she woke up and said that she wanted to go to a hot spring. What was that? I think she knew her time was nearing and she probably wanted to leave us with a special memory. She rarely took trips anywhere. Cabbage stared intently at the photo. Does this photo help you remember anything? I asked. I think so. I think I'm starting to feel something. It seemed like Cabbage was recovering a small fragment of his memory. I wanted to see if I could get him to remember even more. So I carried on showing him photos and talking him through them. We took time. Hold up, my hand's getting tired. I don't know why. Or maybe I'm getting tired, but there's only 10 more pages, y'all. I read no time plates. Oh no. We took some time studying the one from 4 years ago at the hot springs. At that point, Mom's condition had become hopeless. She was throwing up every day, in pain all the time, and she couldn't sleep. But then one morning, she woke up and called me into her room and told me that she wanted to go to a hot spring, somewhere on the coast where she could see the ocean. I was bewildered by this sudden request, and asked her over and over again if she was sure that this was something that she really wanted to do. I couldn't tell whether she really meant it, but Mom was insistent. She hadn't made any special requests up to that point, so I was surprised. I managed to persuade the doctor to let her out for just a day or two. Then she revealed her plan to me. I want the whole family to come. You, your father, and Cabbage. That's what mattered most to her. To have the whole family together. Despite my mother's illness, I hadn't exchanged one word with my father during the entire time she was sick. I don't think I even made eye contact with him. Our relationship, or lack thereof, had hardened over the years. And once it was established that we never spoke, it had gone on so long, that became just the way it was. So I can imagine that at first I balked at the idea of going on a trip to a hot spring with him, or even talking to him about it. But I knew that this would probably be my mother's last trip, so I swallowed my pride. Wait, hold up, is there like a good stopping point for me to take a break? Here, Alright, fine. Right? So I swallowed my pride, took a deep breath, and decided to see if I could persuade my father to come along with us. What a stupid idea, he replied, which was a response to just about everything. But despite my feelings and the mental exhaustion that came from trying to communicate with him in any way, I persisted and managed to persuade him. And it was the last trip my mother would ever take, and also the first time I'd ever traveled a significant distance with her. So I went out of my way to put together an especially nice itinerary for our trip. It was a 3-hour voyage by train to a hot spring on the coast. When we arrived, the beach stretched out as far as the eye could see, bathed in soft sunlight. I had booked us at an elegant oceanside inn with an unforgettable view of the coastline. My mother had seen the place in a photo in a magazine. It was a place she'd always wanted to go. The inn was perfect, a traditional old farmhouse built over 100 years ago, and remodeled for use as a hotel. There were only 2 rooms in the entire place, and a dazzling view of the ocean from the second floor. Outside was a rustic bathing area, and beyond that the coast spread out into the distance. And there were plenty of places where you could sit and watch the sunset. I was sure Mom would be happy with the choice, so I put everything I had into getting us a reservation there. So our whole family set out on our trip, with the doctors and nurses waving us off in front of the hospital. It was the first time in a long time that the entire family, all 3 of us, plus the cat, had gone away together. We traveled by rail, and in the train car we sat facing each other in cramped seats, my father and I barely speaking. Mom sat opposite to us, watching us and smiling. Somehow my dad and I survived a 3-hour-long train ride, and then, just when we were reaching our limit, the conductor's voice blared out over the PA system, announcing that we had arrived at our stop. With a spring in my step, I pushed my mother in her wheelchair and we headed for the inn. But once we arrived, disaster struck. Our reservation hadn't gone through, and someone else had booked the room. Wait, no way. I couldn't believe it. I explained to hotel staff over the phone over and over again that I had reserved a room over the phone and how much the trip meant to my mother, how it might be our last family vacation together. But they refused to listen to my pleas. The owner of the hotel expressed her apologies very politely but wouldn't budge. I was devastated that I wouldn't be able to fulfill one of my mother's last wishes and do something that would make her happy. Yeah, don't worry about it, she told me, but I couldn't forgive myself. I was so frustrated and disappointed that I was on the brink of tears. Not knowing what to do, I stood there in stunned silence. Then, all of a sudden, I felt my father pat me on the shoulder with one of his large, firm hands and say, "Well, we can't have your mother camping outside in air condition. I'll go find something for us." He hurried out the door of the inn. I'd never seen him move so fast in my whole life. I ran after him, offering to help. Dad raced between the nearby inns, checking to see if there had been any room available. Growing up, I only ever saw my father working silently in the shop. I couldn't believe he could move at such high speed. Even when he came to watch me play sports at school, he would always sit absolutely still, like a rock, barely moving a muscle. This was the first time in my life I'd ever seen him run, for any reason. And it's making me remember my parents and making me remember any memories of my parents. What the heck? So honestly, his dad is basically my dad. My dad, is so apathetic. He's just kind of just chilling, doing nothing. Always saying, man, really annoying. He's always really grumpy. But then when I actually see him do stuff like this, I really remember that. Makes me remember that, wow, my dad's also a dad. Your dad was actually pretty fast on his feet back in the old days. I remember my mom told me as I dashed around trying to keep up with him. I think many dads are like that. Yeah, and being able to see them in this like this is really, I don't know. It's just a very strong memory. Despite his compact muscular frame, Dad ran around the hot spring resort with a surprising gracefulness. We ran around trying everywhere, but were turned away time and time again. Some inns only one of us would try, others we went into together, pleading with the innkeepers, but it was high season and all of the inns were full. We just couldn't leave Mom without a decent place to stay. We both wanted to make this trip special for her. That was the first time, maybe the only time since I'd become an adult, that my father's feelings and my own were in sync. After scouring the inns, lining the beach, and running back and forth, we finally found a vacancy. The inn was dimly lit, and outside looked a bit older and more run down than the other ones we'd seen. Our first impressions were confirmed when we went inside and the floorboards creaked as we walked up to the front desk. "This will be just fine," Mom said, beaming as we wheeled her in, but despite her cheeriness, I felt awful for having her stay in a place like this. But as Dad reminded me, we didn't have much choice. Mom couldn't exactly camp outdoors in air condition, so without any alternative, the shabby old hotel is where we stayed. The stay of the place might not have been great, but the innkeeper was warm and friendly. The dinner was prepared for us, wasn't exactly extravagant, but the cook had obviously put his heart into it and it tasted delicious. Mom raved over and over again how good it was there and how good the food was. Seeing her genuinely pleased and smiling did help me feel a little bit better about the situation. The night we all slept in one big room. Our mattresses lined up all in a row. It was the first time in 10 years that we'd been together like that. Staring up at the old wooden ceiling, I was reminded of the house we lived in when I was in primary school. It didn't have many rooms, and the entire family slept together upstairs in the only bedroom. Sleeping mats next to one another? Now, 20 years later, we found ourselves doing the exact same thing. It was a strange feeling. I knew it would be the last time we would ever be together like this. With all those thoughts running through my head, I couldn't sleep. I wondered if Mom and Dad felt the same way. It was quiet, and the only sound I could hear in the small, dark room was Cabbage's breathing, blending in with yet just barely detectable above. The rhythmic sound of the ocean's waves. Finally, it began to get light outside. It was maybe 4 or 5 in the morning at that point. I rose from my mattress and went to sit in the window seat. I pulled back the curtain and stared out the window. To my surprise, the old inn sat so close to the beach that the sea occupied almost the entire view that I saw before me. Since it was already dark by the time we found our inn, I hadn't noticed how close we were to the water. For a while I sat there and gazed at the ocean, which, wrapped in pale morning light, looked like something from a dream. After some time I noticed that my parents were awake too. They both had circles under their eyes. I guess they hadn't been able to sleep either. Mom still wearing her bedtime robe. I looked out the window at the panoramic view of the sea and suggested that we all go for a walk on the beach. "Let's take some pictures," she said. I love strolling along the beach early in the morning. Cabbage was still asleep, so Mom scooped him up and placed him on her lap, adjusted her robe, and was ready to go. Once she settled in her wheelchair, we set off. The early morning light was still dim, and there was a bit of a chill in the air. Mom wanted to go closer to the water, but I discovered that it was too difficult to push the wheelchair in the wet sand. After a while, I couldn't get it to budge at all. Then the sun began to rise, its rays dancing on the surface of the ocean, creating a sparkling effect. All 3 of us stopped and watched in awe, captivated by how beautiful the scene was. "Hurry up, take a picture." Mom's order interrupted my reverie, and I quickly took out the camera. Dad and I took turns taking pictures of the sunrise. Then the innkeeper joined us on the beach and offered to take a picture of all of us. With the ocean behind us, Mom sat in her wheelchair with my father and me on either side of her. Dad and I crouched down so that our heads would still be on the same level as Mom's, and Cabbage, who had finally woken up, made a face, then let out a big yawn from Mom's lap. "Say cheese," the owner of the inn announced as he snapped a photo. "Thank you," we shouted in unison. "One more," he commanded, so he lined up again, this time with all of us standing. "Okay, smile, say cheesecake." The innkeeper's earnest efforts to get us to smile and his general friendliness, which was just short of overbearing, made us all laugh. And right at that exact moment, the shutter snapped. "Do you remember anything?" I prodded Cabbage again after I finished my story. Apologies, old boy, I tried, but I just don't remember. That's too bad, Cabbage. I'm really sorry, I can't help it. No matter how hard I try, I can't remember anything. Although there is this one thing. What one thing? Bearmel emoji doesn't sound right though. That I was happy. That's all I remember. You were happy? Yes. And that's what I remember when I look at these photos. Simply that I was happy. It seemed odd to me that Cabbage couldn't remember any of the details of that trip. Not of the inn, not even of Mom herself, but that he could somehow remember that he'd felt happy. Something about what Cabbage said made me start to think, and then it dawned on me. Mom didn't want that trip just for herself. She planned it because she wanted me and Dad to make up. I wondered why I never realized it before. From the moment she gave birth to me, Mom dedicated all of her time to me and Dad. I never imagined that when she had such little time left, she would still only be thinking of us two. She didn't have to, but she devoted her life to us till the very end. I forgot the details from her emotions. I never really thought about it. She had me completely fooled. It had taken me all this time to realize what she was doing. I looked back at the photos and noticed the embarrassed look on my father's face as he forced himself to smile. And me, with a smile so much like my father's, with a face so much like my father's, also forcing an awkward smile for the camera. And then there's Mom, sitting between us and grinning as if she couldn't be happier. As I looked at her face, my heart grew heavy thinking of all she had done for me. Right there in front of Cabbage, as I stared silently at the photograph, tears started rolling down my face and my voice caught in my throat. Cabbage came up to me with a worried look on his face and jumped into my lap. Instantly, my heart began to feel soothed as his radiated into my body. Cats are really something, huh? I thought. They're capable of completely ignoring you half the time. But then, they seem to know what you're really in need of some comforting. Just as cats don't have any sense of time, loneliness must not exist for them either. They're simply the time you spend alone and the time you spend with others. I suppose loneliness is another thing that only human beings feel. But looking at my mother's smiling face in those old photos made me think that perhaps loneliness is the reason that we can feel other feelings. As I stroked his warm, I think that perhaps was the reason that we can't feel other feelings. It reminds me of what you always talked about, how distance can make feelings more tender or more... Forever the exact words. As I stroked his warm, furry body, I decided to ask Cabbage, "Do you know what love is?" "No, sir. What's that?" "Well, I guess a cat would understand. It's something humans have. It's when you really like someone and they're extremely important to you. It makes you feel like you want to be with them all the time." It's a hot girlfriend. Yeah, that's the word. Paraphrasing. "Is it a good thing?" he asked. "Yeah. Though I guess it can be also a bit of a pain sometimes too. You can also start to feel like the other person is a burden. But all in all, it's a good thing." Yes, that's it. Love. That's the expression Mom wears on her face in that photograph. What else could you call it apart from love? And love, this magical thing that's unique to human beings and can sometimes make us absolutely miserable, is also the thing that buoys the human spirit. Like time, color, temperature, and loneliness, love is one of those things that only humans experience. These things can rule over or control us, but they also allow us to live more fully. They are precisely what makes us human. No sooner had these thoughts occurred to me than my ears suddenly picked up something that sounded like the ticking of a clock. But when I looked around, everything was just as before. There were no clocks to be found anywhere. Nevertheless, even though I couldn't see it with my eyes, I got the feeling that there was something spurring me on. I started to get the sense that the endless ticking sound in my head might actually be the sound of the hearts of all the people in the world beating in time with one another. Well, that's a really beautiful line. What the heck? Images appear to me in quick succession. In my mind's eye, I see the second hand of a stopwatch moving around the dial. Then, athletes sprinting a 100-meter dash. The second hand goes around and around the dial. Someone presses a button. It's the silence button on a child's alarm clock. The child who presses the button crawls back underneath the covers. In his dream, he watches the hands of a large grandfather clock against the wall go round and round the dial. The big clock tower is lit up by the morning sun. Young lovers wait for their dates beneath it. I walk quickly past the lovers toward the tram stop, glancing at my watch. As always, the tram's a bit late. I arrive in front of a small clock repair shop. Countless clocks are laid out in a cramped space. I can hear them ticking. The sound fills every corner of the small space. It's the sound of time being carved up. I stand still for a while, bending my ear toward the noise. It's a sound I've heard constantly my entire life. A sound that rules my life but also gives me freedom. Gradually, the beating of my heart steadies and grows calm. Then, before long, the sound fades into the distance, little by little, until it disappears. I stirred from my dream, closed the album, and placed it back into the closet. Well, Cabbage, I guess it's time to hit the sack. Cabbage meowed in response. Cabbage, what happened? Now you're acting like a cat again. No sarcastic comments came from him in his now familiar, outdated manner of speaking. Cabbage simply meowed. This felt like a bad omen. Why are you disappointed, sir? Came a voice from behind me. Startled, I spun around and then stood Aloha. This time he wore a black Hawaiian shirt with an eerie-looking print, a picture of the ocean at night. He stood there with a big grin on his face. Might this be the end, sir? He asked in his snootiest voice. That's not funny, you had me worried. Alright, I'm sorry. I guess the magic spell didn't last as long as I expected. So he's back to being just a normal cat, huh? Are you disappointed, sir? Stop calling me sir. Okay, I get it. But you know, this timing couldn't be more perfect. Aloha smiled as if he said this. It was that devilish grin that looked familiar, as I had seen it somewhere before. It was the look of someone with evil intentions. A look that only humans are capable of. So, he announced, grinning ear to ear, I decide that I'm going to have you make disappear from the world next. If it's the cat, I'm gonna go crazy. I got a strong sense that something terrible was about to happen, and found that I was having difficulty breathing again. Imagination. Now there's another thing that only human beings have. I thought as cruel images raced around in my head. Without thinking, I cried out, please stop, or no, it wasn't me who was yelling, but rather my doppelganger devil. You want to scream at the top of your lungs, don't you? He laughed. Please just stop, I begged him, falling to my knees in front of him. But he didn't stop. Instead, the devil revealed his plan. This time, let's make cats disappear from the world.